Okay, we'll call the meeting to order. Celeste, please call the roll.
I'm regretting that.
Case, Jadish,
Here.
Evans.
Here.
Kasserag.
Here.
Leidig.
Here.
Mead. Slipka.
Here.
Stevenson.
Here.
Stacking.
Here.
We have a quorum.
All right, thank you. Next item on the agenda is approval of the agenda for this evening.
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Next item is approval of minutes of April 11th, 2019.
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, so we have one item on our agenda this evening. It's a continuation of the March 28th, 2019 meeting. The item we're going over tonight is the downtown zoning update, review and recommendation of proposed text amendment to Title 11 zoning ordinance and Title 12 subdivision of the City of Geneva Code and zoning map amendments for the downtown area. Related documents are available on the project website. Presentation will be provided by Director of Community Development, David DeGroot. At this time, Mike, I have to ask if you've read the minutes of the meeting and have looked at all the materials that are prepared to go since you weren't here the
Table
last.
for David if needed, so.
Yeah, okay, there you go.
No, yes, I have.
So you're ready to go?
Yes.
Okay. This evening, to be brief, I'll go over the procedures just in general. I won't read the whole text because it's long, but then I'm losing my voice. First, the Planning Commission Secretary Designated Representative will read the items into the record. Second, the petitioner, which this case is the city, will walk through the zoning requests that were done on the last meeting. Last meeting was a little bit different than we normally operate. In that fact, we suspended the rules and we made recommendations on specific zoning areas within the downtown zoning district. This evening, we're going to actually go through that and look at what actually transpired on that as final recommendation, so the commission is all clear. We did a lot of recommendations. We did about a dozen or so. So just to make sure that we're all on top of that, and then some additional materials that the commission requested from the last public hearing as well as the public, so we received some additional input. At that point, the commission will ask questions. And then fourth, the public will be invited to ask questions to whoever. And then we'll have a series of discussions until we figure we have enough in the record to either close the hearing or continue it. When all testimony is brought into the record, the hearing will be closed and the Plan Commission will make a recommendation to City Council in the form of motions or motions. In order to give testimony, you must provide your name and address on the registration sheet when you walked in. By signing the registration sheet, you agree that and understand anything you say will be considered sworn testimony and affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. When giving testimony, please approach the lectern and speak directly into the microphone so that you may be heard. Please, by stating your name and giving your address. If you speak additional times, please state your name each time for the record. Please be concise when presenting your testimony, and if your point has already been made, it is not necessary to repeat it. Each of these points is recorded and will be considered as the Plan Commission develops findings of fact and recommendation or recommendations. If you provide testimony in written form, it must be presented to the Plan Commission Secretary or designated representative prior to the close of the public hearing. After the process is completed, everyone wishing to present testimony has spoken. The Commission will then decide whether it has heard adequate testimony in order to make a decision. If it has, the public hearing will be closed. After the public hearing is closed, the Plan Commission will refrain from receiving any additional testimony either for or against the petition. There is one exception to this rule. City staff will submit a report based on testimony presented at the hearing. This report will consider comments and concerns from city departments such as the Fire Department, Public Works Department, or Engineering Department. Okay, so everybody understands how we're going to proceed this evening? At this time, I will administer the oath to those who have signed the registration form. Anyone wishing to give sworn testimony, ask questions, or cross-examine anyone giving sworn testimony, please stand and raise your right hand. Do you swear and affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. You may be seated. Okay, Paul, we have some additional items on the record. Or David's going to do it? Okay.
Thank you, Chairman. I do have a few additional items to read into the record since the last meeting on March 28th. We have a revised map depicting the existing and proposed zoning districts based on the recommendations made by the Commission on March 28th. A revised map depicting the Downtown Station Area Master Plan's land use plan and the proposed zoning districts, again, based on the recommendations from the Commission on March 28th. We have minutes from the meeting on March 28th, sign-in sheets from the meeting on March 28th, a copy of the presentation provided on March 28th, and then exhibits provided by Patty Lane during the March 28th public hearing. So I think before we get started, I did want to just spend a few minutes and go over what I took away from the last meeting as the recommendations of the Commission after reviewing my notes, the minutes, the video,
The long meeting,
right, the marathon.
marathon.
So just stop me if any of these sound like they're inaccurate, or if there's one of these that we want to revisit at some point this evening, we can make a note and do that. The first was on use determinations. The proposed ordinance provides for some administrative approval of uses that are not specifically listed. The Commission provided direction to make sure that if we were to make those determinations, they were substantially similar to uses already permitted. And if there was any, I guess, question, that those uses would be brought forward to the Commission either in the form of a special use permit or a text amendment. So we'll be making those changes to the text. The second item we discussed was the district standards for the mixed high-density residential district. The Commission had two recommendations there, and one was to reduce the building height to a maximum of 35 feet. It was proposed originally at 40 feet for rear-loaded townhomes. And then anything more than 3 attached units should require a special use. So those recommendations will be carried forward in the ordinance. The third was regarding some properties on the south side of James Street between 5th and 7th. The Commission recommended to retain the mixed density residential zoning on the 2 block fronts. The next one was 18 South 5th Street. This was a office use just behind the Pure Oil building. Was originally proposed for the residentially scaled commercial mixed use, and the Commission recommended putting it in the downtown commercial mixed use, which is more the State Street frontage type zoning. Part of that discussion also included the State Bank of Geneva. That was proposed as downtown residentially scaled commercial mixed use, and the Commission recommended to keep that zoning in the event that block of properties, or half block of property, would ever to redevelop. Then we went down to 3rd Street between James and Campbell Street. This is really from Artemisia, the History Center, down to 127 3rd Street. Those were originally recommended to be, again, in the residentially scaled district, but they really have that kind of presence on the sidewalk, 100% lot coverage. So the Commission recommended taking it out of that residentially scaled district and putting it in the commercial mixed-use district. Then we had the block of properties up on Anderson Boulevard, 308, 318, 328. This is Altiro's, the karate place. I think there's a yoga studio there. The property owner was looking to have the downtown commercial mixed-use district, and the Commission recommended keeping it as residentially scaled commercial mixed-use. Again, thinking if it were ever to be redeveloped, it's in a more of a residential setting and should be of a lower scale. Then we looked at 35 North Bennett. This is just north of the Geneva Geneva Place retirement community. There's a little commercial building there that was originally proposed to be single family, and the Commission recommended keeping it in the commercial district because the lot really didn't function well as a residential lot. Then we looked at the south side of East State Street. beginning at Bennett and extending up to Chrissy Avenue, where the two homes were recently demolished. The commission recommended keeping the west half of that block. Sorry, I think I've got a typo here. The west half of that block is the downtown commercial mixed use, instead of a multifamily residential district. And then the east half of the block is the mixed density residential zoning, which was more of the townhomes type development. The thinking there was that the commercial mixed use would allow for both commercial and residential, where the residential would really restrict what you could do on that corner. Then we looked at 426 River Lane. This was a property that was shown in the opportunity site as part of a multifamily redevelopment, but for some reason was shown as single family on the land use plan. So the commission recommended resolving that conflict and having it as the downtown multifamily district. Then we looked at 417 North First Street. This is the property just north of the First Street row homes at Stevens and First Street. The only property in that stretch that was shown as single family. So the commission recommended keeping that consistent with the adjacent properties and having it in the mixed density residential district. We looked at Anderson and State, the block of properties bounded by Anderson, State, Richards, and Hamilton. There were 3 properties on the west half of that block that were shown as single family, and the commission felt it was a better transition from the commercial property to kind of step down from there to mixed density residential, and then onto the single family as you head north on Anderson. I think these are the last two. We had 404 and 426 South 3rd Street, Little Traveler in the property to the south. Commission recommended keeping the residentially scaled commercial mixed use district there to preserve the front lawns of those properties and not allow them to build out to the sidewalk. Kind of be consistent with the character of 3rd Street. And then finally, we had 511 and 513 South 3rd Street, which is Preservation Bread and Wine, Atlas Chicken, again, properties that have that street front 100% lot coverage, but were proposed for a zoning that really didn't line up with that, so the commission recommended the downtown commercial mixed use district for that. These are all the recommendations that were made by this body in that 4.5-hour meeting last week that I can recall. If there's anything that you think I missed, please let me know. Or if there's any of these you want to revisit, we have time to do so this evening too.
I think you covered it,
Okay, good.
so it's a lot.
Yeah, we did a lot. I'm impressed.
So similar to the last meeting, I think we were able to be productive at that meeting because we were waiving some of our rules and making recommendations while the public hearing is open. We don't have as many this evening, but I think it would still make sense to follow that procedure. So to do so, we would need a motion to suspend that rule to allow the commission to deliberate and make findings and recommendations while the public hearing is still open.
For your motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make the motion that we adjust the rules for the public hearing so that we can make recommendations as we come upon them in the discussion rather than holding them till the end of the meeting.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Celeste, please call the roll.
Jadish.
Aye.
Evans.
Aye.
Kesserag.
Aye.
Leidig.
Aye.
Slivka.
Aye.
Stevenson.
Aye.
Stocking.
Aye.
Passes.
All right.
Okay, so the first item I have this evening is one that we did not cover at all at the last meeting. Following that meeting, received a phone call and an email from a property owner concerned with the proposed zoning for their property at 112 North 4th Street. I tried to highlight it here in the kind of green hatched area in the photo. This is just one property north of Hamilton along 4th Street. The existing zoning is the B2 Hamilton Street North Transitional Business District. The proposed zoning was for mixed high-density residential. And the downtown stationary master plan recommended that it be single-family residential.
This one?
So, as you can see there, a few conflicts.
Oh, it's not the new one.
This is a kind of streetscape photo of the property.
This one or that one?
The owner's concerns with the proposed residential zoning is that the existing use as a dentist office would then become non-conforming. That the building was actually constructed as a dental office in the 1950s and was never suited for residential because it didn't have proper driveway, parking, plumbing for that use. Staff has been able to verify that that is true, that the building was constructed as a dental office in the 1950s. And I think what maybe occurred here is that on the drive-by a few years ago, identifying properties as residential or commercial, it definitely reads as residential from the street. And it has kind of a nondescript sign advertising the office, and it could have just been a miss. If you look back at the district boundaries, you can see it's kind of an odd jog where the rest of the commercial zone does extend to that second property as you go north. When we looked at how the property relates to the proposed zoning district, it would definitely comply with the lot area, lot width, lot coverage, and setback requirements for the residential zoning. But again, the dentist office would become a non-conforming use. When we looked at it compared to the residentially scaled commercial mixed-use district, it would again comply with all the lot area and setback requirements. The existing use as a dental office could remain and be conforming. And it doesn't eliminate the possibility for residential uses either, because that transitional business district also allows for single-family, two-family, or three-family dwellings. So I guess with that said, from a staff perspective, we're comfortable if it were to go into the residentially scaled commercial mixed-use district. I know that the property owners are here this evening. I don't know if they want to speak to the matter as well.
Sure, we can hear from them at this time.
I'm Jeannie Walski. I own the property at 112 North 4th Street, which was commercial and, as he had said, always built as a dental office. My daughter-in-law is the dentist, and my son is also a dentist. And part of our concern with if it stays residential is it might be our hope that the two can combine, and we might be able to maybe combine their practices together, and that would be pretty impossible if it's in the residential zoning. And we wouldn't be able to make any improvements on the business, and we intend to always keep it as a dental office. That's our intent. And we just purchased the building in December 14th, so we were unaware of any of the zoning that was going on. We never, all of the information had gone to the existing owner.
I'm Allison Walski. I am the owner of the dental office, the dental practice, and obviously this would affect our business and our ability to grow, so.
Okay, all right.
Thank you.
David, what's immediately across the street? Is that the church there?
Testing my memory, I've done so many
I
drive-throughs that
think it's,
neighborhood.
I think it's the church.
The church?
Yes.
Okay.
So, I mean, part of it is that it fronts on a residential street, so that's kind of, was,
Across the street, it's business.
you know, how we initially got it, you know,
Right.
put into that category, because in order to keep it consolidated, but I'm pretty sure the church is directly across the street, so it's not like you're facing another single-family house.
Right.
So, anything else? Cindy?
But it says across the street, it's residentially scaled commercial mixed use.
Right.
So why couldn't it be also residentially scaled commercial mixed use as well?
That's what we're suggesting.
And just
That's what I think is
stay,
probably.
so that it could be mixed use, so that they could continue with it. So that they could grow their business. But it could also, they may say, forget it, we don't want to stay here. And then it could be converted to a house if the next owners want to do that, but it would also give them flexibility to grow their business. Wouldn't that zoning allow the flexibility for it to go either way?
Correct. That's correct.
Yeah, am I missing something then? Doesn't that solve all the problems?
Well, so the original proposal was that it would only be the mixed-density residential.
Correct.
So the proposed change would then be to go to the residentially scaled
Ah,
commercial, and it
right.
would make the use conforming. It would give them the ability to expand if they want to expand the building, which they do have some room to do so. But it would also give them the flexibility in the future to market it as either commercial or residential.
So it would have flexibility either way. So if they sold it, they could sell it as a regular house, and they could change it around, and it could be a real pretty house and
Right,
go back, or they could make a larger business, correct?
correct.
Yeah,
I think that'd be ideal
I think we're good.
for both the city and
Yeah,
them.
Yep.
Is that the consensus of the group? Yes?
Yes.
Definitely.
Okay. Okay, if there's nothing else on that one, we'll move on to the next property, and we'll include that recommendation when we forward that to the city council. Okay, so the next area for review is the one we spent probably the most time on at the last meeting. We had some areas that were shown in the downtown master plan as being single-family residential along Fifth Street, Sixth Street, the south side of Peyton Street, the west side of Richard Street, and then a pocket along Howard and Dotson on the east side of town. These properties were brought forward as mixed high-density residential, which was the recommendation of the working group that kind of helped form these recommendations. The reason that the working group came to that conclusion is because when we looked at the properties in relation to the single-family zoning requirements, it would have created a lot of nonconformities. Actually, the great majority would be nonconforming in some form, whether it's a lot size being too small or setbacks being too small. And then they also saw that there were approximately 42 out of the 108 properties that had multiple dwelling units. The area we really focused on, though, on March 28th was this area along the south side of Peyton and then along North 5th and North 6th Streets. This is an area that the working group felt had some existing multifamily housing there, and in order to kind of balance the goals of the downtown master plan of encouraging diversity of housing types and providing density in the downtown area, to keep that zoning as mixed density residential. And by doing so, you may help kind of reduce development pressures in other areas. When this area went before the Historic Preservation Commission, they agreed, as the Plan Commission did last month, that anything over 3 units should require a special use. The building height should be no higher than 35 feet. But they really wrestled, as the commission did, this commission did last month, with where those boundaries should be drawn. If this entire area should stay mixed density residential, if it should all go back to single family, or if there was some kind of in between. There was some discussion of everything west of Fifth Street being in the mixed density, and everything to the east being single family. But they never really reached a consensus. And when this commission had the same discussion last month, it came to a vote, and it was a 4-4 tie. And that's at that point that we decided to revisit this at this meeting. So just some photos of multiple dwelling buildings that are in that area. Some examples of the single-family housing in that area. But this map I don't think we did share at the last meeting, and we've kind of refined since then to make sure it's as accurate as it can be. These blue highlights represent existing multifamily buildings in the study area. So I think when you look at that, you have some in the single-family area, about just a few, and then as you get closer to First Street, there's a little bit more on the north side of Peyton Street. There's really only three as east of Fifth Street, but then you do see there is more of a cluster west of Fifth Street of those existing duplexes or three flats in that area. We also looked at kind of the zoning history of this area and the comprehensive plan history for this area. From a zoning perspective, it's been zoned for multifamily units since we could trace it back as far as 1956. The comprehensive plan showed it as multifamily with the exception of the south side of Peyton between 2nd and 3rd Street, just that block face. Showed that as multifamily until 2003. So then in 2003, the comprehensive plan showed it as long-term, converting to a single-family neighborhood, and then that was, I guess, reiterated in the 2013 Downtown Station Area Master Plan. So I guess the question for the commission on this area is same as it was a month ago. If we feel it should be mixed-density residential, single-family residential, or if there's some logical line to redraw the boundaries.
Who wants to start out?
Does anybody, should we let anybody that wants to
We
talk
can
about
do
it?
that if you want. Yeah, okay. We can take public testimony. I have 4 people on the list. Frank, are you here? Yes. 316 Anderson Boulevard? Yes. Do you want to speak on this, please?
Well, not on this issue.
Oh, not on this issue? Okay. Anybody here that wants to speak? Ma'am?
As
Ma'am, will you please identify yourself and the address?
Patty Lane, 516 Ford Street. As I had said before, I think that the area, the R3 that's there now, and then the R6, the makeup of multifamily is very similar, and the downtown station plan, which took a lot of time and energy and thought to figure out and plan for, to just change it in an hour and 45 minutes in a focus group last fall and decide, let's just keep it this and not turn it to R3, which the master plan shows, seems a little rushed or taking the easy road. I think that there's the double, I brought up the last time, the redundant transitional areas, the residentially scaled commercial that's along Hamilton is kind of like that's a buffer zone going into residential neighborhood. Well, then you got another, what's typically used as a transition zone, the multifamily. And so I think that's redundant. And, the nature of part of the downtown master plan too is, trying to preserve the nature of the downtown homes, the single-family homes that would really, change the nature of the single-familyness of the area if it's, allowed to have any of the 6 units or, even 3 units if people tore them down and built, smaller, sections of townhouses. They're just on the Citron property, the 6 little, the 6 little units that they are building, I think it's 6. Hang on a second here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I mean, you can see how tiny, tiny of a space that you need to have the 6 townhouses. And these are the properties that are on 6th Street, the R6 as it is. So you see how tiny of a space they, can fit in townhouses. So, it really could become, changing of the neighborhood and too dense for the area. And, I think that there is a demand for it. The, homes I had brought up before, a lot of the homes that have been redeveloped in that area. There's some on Peyton, one on Peyton that had gotten changed over from a multifamily to single-family home fairly recently. And then there's, I know, it's in R3, but it's right on Fifth Street. Two people are trying their, darndest to, one's trying to get their house, approved to build. And, the other one is, I think, still trying to secure a buyer, but has difficulty getting it past the approval process. So I think that it would be a better, easier sell for them, if the whole area is treated as R3, when, and in fact, they're not very dissimilar. I counted up the number of, roughly, I just counted tonight, 14 out of the 57, I counted about 57 R6s there. So 14 out of the 57 are multifamily, and then in the yellow section, I think it's about 9 out of, in this maybe 60 to 65 range. I didn't get to add up that, but, I think they're similar enough, and then, having that redundancy is not taking advantage of the, historic homes that are there. Eventually they're going to become more worth more torn down to somebody to build, townhouses, so. And then I just had one other comment, I didn't get to comment, back, and I think you guys decided already, but on James, that section R5, there was another house that was shown as an example that it was a multifamily there, but it's not, it's a single-family home. That's the one that I shared with you, Paul. So there's only 4 out of the 10 homes that are multifamily in that section, that R5 that you guys decided on. And between the yellow house, the blue house in the corner, and then the family who built with Hogan, along the alley side, there's a little alley that shoots through to Campbell. They all just renovated their homes, put a lot of money into them. So why they're, it's for them staying single family R3, like the downtown station plan had shown. I don't know if they're aware of it or not, but they, put a lot of money into their homes. So, anyway, that's it.
Okay,
Okay.
all right, thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak on this particular zoning case? I'll call it a zoning. Okay. Yes, David?
Just wanted to remind the commission, as you consider this area, the mixed-density residential district, anything over 3 units would require a special use based on the recommendations of the commission, and building height would be restricted to 35 feet under the proposed zoning district. That is a deviation from what the materials originally had, so as you can have your deliberation, just keep that in mind.
Okay. Brad?
So if we do approve the change to high-density residential, right? Are the single-family homes non-conforming?
The mixed-density residential allows for single-family, 2-family, and 3-family, so they would be conforming uses.
So the people that she referred to that have invested, those people are fine, nothing.
Right, they would
Right
not
to their
become
property
non-conforming. They would be allowed to expand or
Do anything they wanted.
demolish, rebuild, yeah, right. I don't know if that's the context that she was referring to. I think she was looking for more of a homogeneous, single-family neighborhood.
Right, but I guess, I mean, what I was hearing though, you know, those people that have invested in converting from a multifamily to a single family or invested in their own single-family homes, I mean, those people on their own property, there's nothing wrong with what they did, or there's no threat to them on their own. It's their neighbors, the potential of the development of their neighbors, I get that, but.
Well, I guess, you know, with having the downtown station plan, master plan, you know, people may buy property with the plans like, oh, well, this is going to be going back to R3 at some point, you know, so it's shown as R3 in the, you know, future plans of Geneva. And so for them to decide in an hour and 45 minutes, 2 meetings, hour 45 minutes, to say, I don't think we're going to follow what people took years to develop in this downtown station plan, to just decide in an hour and 45 minutes that, no, we're not going to do that. There was a lot of, you know, deliberation on that, why they were going to have it go back to R3. So I think it's very short-sighted to just make a change like that without, you know, taking into consideration all the work they did and trying to determine what to do with it and why, so.
Okay, thank you. Anything else?
Not at this time.
Okay. Cindy, go ahead.
So basically, what Ms. Lane is saying is that the people who are in R3, who have spent money on their homes and are putting money in, investing, she's afraid they're going to lose money because the people across the street have a home of lesser value because they have a different zoning area. So that's what you're saying?
No, I'm just saying that on the downtown station master plan, R3, you know, is more of a single-family environment, and people may have bought homes in those areas under the guise that this is going to be changing back to R3. This is what's on the city's plan. And the biggest thing is there's really not much difference between the two zonings, and I think they should be treated equally, you know, as far as the makeup, not by the two zonings. What I mean is by the neighborhood. You know, there's multifamily sprinkled in to the R3. The R6 is turning back to single family. So, you know, the people across the street from me, they don't use their multifamily as a multifamily anymore. It's a single family. There's, I don't know if my house was ever multifamily, but it's single family now. I'm literally right where the R is with the R6. You know, so that's what I'm saying is it seems to be short-sighted to not just follow what the master plan says, just, you know, with an hour and 45-minute meeting, you know, 2 meetings, and not, you know, take the word from the people who worked on the master plan. They are trying to preserve the single-family nature of the north section of the historic district. And I don't think, I had, there was historic preservation, I think also was leaning towards, you know, that, you know, the preserving of the single-family nature was something that they, you know, I know everything has to go before the board, but you never know what happens. You know, things get approved that you never would have thought would have been approved, but they do, you know, so. That's,
All right, thank you.
And that does go across to the R6, where your property in the R6. It does, they're advocating going across to 6th Street. Taking single-family homes.
Right, well, on the downtown station,
Yeah.
that whole, all the gray area, the all R6 there,
Yeah, okay.
that was gonna be R3.
Yeah.
And last time when our last meeting, the marathon meeting, you guys were kind of leaning towards the triangle where you see the I-1, Industrial 1.
Right.
That whole triangle there, that would be the, like, multifamily
That'd be the transition.
townhouse, right, that would be the transition, because you've got the factory there, you've got your, residentially scaled commercial in the orange, the pumpkin orange, that would be protecting the single family on the other side. So, that was where it kind of seemed like you guys were zeroing in on was, the triangle as being the area. And so for comparison, see the little jut out, the hash section above the red B2, and then right above it, the hash section. That's 6 townhomes as part of the Hamilton Place project. This is like the plat for that. And these are lots along 6th Street, so you can see how many townhouses can fit in a, small space. So you could, that area, it would make sense to continue on with that, and you probably could get 2 more rows of, townhouses there, based on, just comparing the scale of this. So I think that would be a good buffer, from the factory, and, it's, did you have a question?
Yeah, I agree with you on that triangle, that would be an appropriate place for the R6. How about what are your feelings on the remainder of the block just to the south of that? Are you objecting to that block being R6?
The whole west side of 6th Street
Right.
would be.
Would be R6?
That would be R6.
All right, so not just the upper triangle,
No,
but the
no.
bigger
whole-
triangle?
Yeah, the whole, all
Okay.
the way to Ace Hardware,
Right.
all the way to Stevens Street on the west side of 6th.
Would it be helpful, David, if we took this in pieces and maybe decide whether or not we all agree on that larger triangle over there, and then move on to the blocks to the east? Maybe we could take some of this out of discussion,
Yeah,
That
we
would
can
be
do whatever we want. Yeah.
Thanks, ma'am.
resolve that piece.
Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's general consensus that that's fine.
Right, I think so too, so we could,
Does anybody else object to that?
No.
no.
Okay.
Okay, so we have agreement on that piece. Then I had a question, if nobody over there was still talking. David, houses in this area that's both R6 and R3 up there, the whole area we're talking about, if they have any architectural significance, that they would have to go before the Historic Preservation Commission before they could be torn down or
Correct. Any
altered
building in the
significantly,
historic
right?
district requires review for demolition. It would require a public hearing if the building is rated as significant or contributing. So it would either be a public meeting and/or a public hearing to demolish the building.
And that would also apply to making a modification such as adding another external entrance if you were subdividing one of the single-family houses into multifamily,
Correct.
correct? So to some extent, the character of the neighborhood is protected by the historic preservation review, even if the zoning were changed to R6. It would not look substantially different without some hearing of some sort to review what they were going to do, and it could be objected to at that point.
It's a fair statement. Not all modification, like, the only time a Historic Preservation Commission review would be a public hearing, would be on a demolition, so exterior modifications, neighbors aren't necessarily notified of those changes. But if they track along with our news blast, they would get notification that way.
Okay, so regardless of what we do, there is some protection to the
Yeah.
character of the area.
Yeah, I think what the Historic Commission was struggling with was just trying to deal with the scale issues, associated with the change. So if it got to a higher density set, then they would be dealing with larger issues that, they may or may not be able to mitigate through some of their review process. So that's what they were struggling with and couldn't really come to a consensus. They understood that it made sense to have conversions of, I'm speaking for them, but it's in the transcript. So basically, they're saying, it makes sense in some cases to have a second unit in a single-family house or on a garage or whatever. That may fit just fine, but if you allow more units, it's going to get more difficult for them to deal with the scaling issues. That's what they were struggling with.
And that's where they came up with the recommendation that anything more than the 3 units should definitely be a special use and have special consideration.
Yeah, so we basically try to deal with that before they get it.
Okay, and as I recall, the reason for going to R6 in this section was, one, it was something of a transition area. 2, was that there were so many non-conforming uses if it were to be R3, because there's so many multifamily in there already. And the third was, and this is one I'm not positive on, but this third was, I believe, to allow another area of the downtown to develop into a higher density area to support the commercial businesses in downtown. Is that true? And to provide a greater variety of housing?
That's correct, and not necessarily only through new development, but for existing single-family homes to be able to be converted to a duplex or 3-flat, right?
So there's the question you raise of it becomes kind of a which way does the city want to go? Do we want to encourage this to go back to single family, as you're suggesting would be what you would prefer? Or do we want to set it up so it can transition to serve as a multifamily area? And there's reasons on both sides, but I don't think it's an appearance, with this limit of 3, I guess what I'm getting to is with the limit of 3 units and the height limit and the historic pres, I don't feel like the character of the area is really threatened as much as it's a philosophical issue of what kind of neighborhood you want this to be, what role it should have. So I'm surprised that the downtown master plan saw it as single family, since there was a lot in that about creating higher density housing near downtown. Can you revisit why they designated it a single family?
I think that's part of what we struggled with is the working group and looking at these areas. I think there was some thought about having owner-occupied investment in these historic structures, and maybe going to single family would help encourage that more. But again, I think it's that balance of the density and kind of the expansion of the single-family neighborhood. This area has been zoned for multifamily zoning since 1956, so the character of this neighborhood has been established underneath this very similar zoning district. And you have this mix of duplexes and single-family homes. I think part of what makes this discussion difficult is that we talk about the objective of increasing density in the downtown area. What is the cap? Is it just kind of endless? We're just trying to increase density at every opportunity? Or, if we want to, we can zoom out and look at the entire map and try to get a better picture of where other opportunities for density lie. Is this area necessary to still be able to increase density?
I think that's a key question for me, because I'm a fan of having more diversity in our housing, and I'd be curious if there are other opportunities for that outside of this neighborhood.
Website's down.
Can I make a comment?
Oh, absolutely.
Look out, David.
David's busy trying to find his map, but there it is.
Oh, there it is.
There it is. Hi, I'm David Tomel. I live at 328 North 3rd Street, which is kind of in the neighborhood. I've been here for 35 years, and historically, over the last 35 years, I've just noticed an upgrading in the quality of housing, and it's tended to gravitate towards single-family usage as opposed to multifamily usage. And I think if you just let nature take its course and leave it the way you are proposing it, it's probably a pretty good idea.
Sir, so you're saying leave it as the R6 or leave it as the R3? As the R6, okay. Just wanted to make sure I understood.
I think you will
Okay.
get you will see it probably turn into single-family more than you'd be likely to see single-family houses being cut up.
Okay.
Okay, yes, ma'am.
I don't know when the basement cutting out has started to occur, but I've noticed some of these multifamilies where they've got the basement graded away, then they build a wall. It's so that they can like fit another unit in the basement. The general condition of a lot of these homes are very poor and deteriorating. And then when you have the basements being excavated out so that they can, get another rental unit out of it, I don't know how that gets, maybe that happened a long time ago, but there's two that I've seen that have that. So I don't know how that gets regulated. And I don't think you guys regulate or make renters of multifamilies or owners of multifamilies register their units either. I don't think, to keep track of how many families are living there, it's things like that. So if, having some sort of regulation or registration for, multifamilies might be a good idea to get a handle on how many people are actually living there. So.
Good point.
Thank you. David?
Okay, just on that note, we're a non-home rule municipality, so we don't have the ability to require licensing for landlords. So it is something the city has looked into in the past and is interested in, but we cannot do that until we reach that home rule status. So kind of looking at the map, just outside of just that area, you go along the east side of North First Street, you have mixed-density residential zoning fronting there. You do have some duplexes and 3 flats in that area. You also have a few single-family homes. And of course, you've got Park Place, the First Street row homes. But as far as more opportunities, you've got the east half of those blocks along the riverfront that are designated for multifamily. So those could be condos or apartments in the future and maybe a little more substantial density. You have all of the north side of Stevens Street on the north side of Burgess Norton, and the west side of Richard Street is also proposed in this mixed density zoning district. Richards is, you've got a lot of single family in there too, but you do on the particularly on the southern end, I think you've got more duplexes in that area. Other opportunities are perhaps the Millrace site, when that redevelops to have residential above commercial. On the east side of Bennett, same situation, kind of that commercial mixed use could include residential units. The corner of Chrissy and 38 is a vacant lot now with some potential This whole area on the east side, there has been some new duplex development in that area in the last few years. And you have some existing there as well. So there's potential for maybe a few more in that area. This whole pocket south of the train tracks, along First and Third where they converge, if that area ever redevelops, that could be an area for some apartments or condos for the transit-oriented dweller. Yeah, we don't have many opportunities left to accommodate it in the downtown, so I'm trying to just look here. I mean, everything in the red could always have apartments above a commercial space, but a lot of our downtown is built out and doesn't either already has those apartments or has office uses that would take some effort to convert to residential. But I think all these areas in orange are also potentials for dwelling units, whether it's single family, two family, or three family, with the exception of those properties that front on 3rd Street. So when you get into these side streets, more so along James and Hamilton, there's some potential there to accommodate some of that more medium density residential.
Can you remind me the rules of the bed and breakfasts, and how does that at all relate to the neighborhood in question?
So bed and breakfasts are proposed to be allowed as a special use in residential zoning districts, and then a permitted use in commercial districts. Again, provided they can park and everything. But if it's in a single family neighborhood, in these areas in yellow, it would require a special use permit.
Would it be allowed in the high density district?
I believe so. Double check that.
Curious. Big factor.
Yes, it would. Oh, I'm sorry. In the mixed high density, it would not. It would still require the special use. It's when you get into the red, it would be allowed as a permitted use, or the dark brown.
Those are more the key areas for it.
Right.
Okay. Michael, do you have anything?
So, as I look at this area, I actually think I like the way it's designated now, or proposed to be designated. I think that I don't see it as a redundancy of transition. I see it as a natural progression from properties with commercial to a higher density residential, and then to a lower density residential. And I think if you look, as we talk about other sites that are available, given the constraints that are already on this of 3 units, that a lot of those sites won't develop that way. They won't necessarily make sense. Could you put the other slide up that shows the non-conforming properties?
This one?
Yeah. So if we start at First Street, for example, and and move to the left, the first block across the street is already properties that are existing as multifamily, right? Is that
In this area?
north?
Right there.
Right?
Correct, right.
And then as you go to the third block, you have the school across the street. And the fourth block, you already have multifamily below. So in a lot of ways, it's already existing. And the properties across the street in the R3 zone are either, a public school property or properties that are functioning the same way. So from my perspective, I think it's an appropriate use of that area as it's currently proposed.
Ron?
I have nothing to add.
Cindy, anything else?
No?
Mike.
Possibly just clarification. I thought I was crystal clear when I first walked in, and then opened the jar, and then I've got pages of notes now. So I guess, my contention is so it seems like the master plan is, maybe this is oversimplifying it, but is maybe a bit stricter on what would be allowed if we were planning to make any changes in and around what I consider the downtown, like the State and Third area, right? Because to me, that's like when I paint a picture of Geneva in my head, that's Geneva, right? That's why the homes are what they cost in that area. That's why folks travel and visit in that area. So I guess really to me, my feel is I want to make it as difficult as possible to have an unregulated opportunity for anybody to buy, again, it'd be prohibitively expensive probably, but buy two houses next to each other and all of a sudden say, hey, I can go to 35 feet on the nose, 3 units, and nobody can say a thing. It'll be there tomorrow, right? So my feel is, no, I want to lean towards the locking down single-family homes. I mean, that's what it should be, given as many blocks outside of what I consider main downtown as possible. And where I'm confused now is, okay, which way locks that down more and prevents, or at least requires anybody with an idea outside of that to have to come here and explain it, essentially sell it, say, here's why it's a great idea, here's what it's going to look like.
Yeah,
That's
it
my
wouldn't be
thought.
a
I'm just
by
trying-
right
exactly.
development, yeah.
On my side, I'm trying to preserve the Norman Rockwell painting that we have down there.
Okay. Dave, you want to respond to that?
I don't know if I need to.
It's
It's
just basically,
Just
I mean,
opinion.
it's
I
just
think
difference
the-
between by right, 3 units or not.
Sure.
I mean, the most,
That's what it kind of boils down to.
yeah, I mean, the most restrictive way to preserve the single family would be to zone it single family. And then you kind of remove any, I guess, incentive to purchase homes, tear them down,
Right. Yep.
and replace them.
Or existing owner to modify their existing house, which would be more likely they come in and try to put an addition on it and try to, given the size of the lots and
Sure.
things, I mean, that's probably the more likely scenario.
I mean, some of the pictures that we saw that would be considered like multi-family, right? I know the houses you saw, I had no clue that they were. They look like just gorgeous, monstrous, single family, and didn't even realize it, and fantastic. I mean, but again, to me, that's the perfect, I guess, hybrid of it, where, you look at it and you're like, wow, look at that, there's a 5,000 square foot, that looks like it's 100 years old, absolutely gorgeous, and if you've got 2 families in there comfortably, that's a win-win, fantastic. As opposed to, some of the larger structures we have now, the multi-unit, they look great. The stuff that we've approved here that City Council has, I think we've done an excellent job on that. I feel like all of those are just far enough away though, where it's like as you're pulling into the core of the city, they're perfectly spaced. Like that's what I expect to see. And then as we get a little further in, you start to kind of get the feel where you see it and you're like, oh my God, especially if you don't live here, like why don't I live here? This is absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things I said at the meeting that you didn't attend, is that taken as a whole, the Geneva's, the character is basically what makes it so unique and why people come here.
Absolutely.
Is residentially scaled. Okay, and that's including most of the along Third Street and so on.
Exactly.
So that's why people come here and stuff. So part of what I think, again, I was on the Downtown Plan Committee that worked through on the plan. Part of it also is part of that mix that makes it the balance, is the residential character of the neighborhoods adjacent to the downtown is almost as critical as Third Street, because it provides a general atmosphere of the town. So if you start getting buildings, even single family, I don't necessarily even like some of the larger single family houses that have been built in the residential areas, because they're out of scale in some cases with what's right next door. That's not to say you can't redesign that, but they tend to be a much larger scale. And the Historic Preservation Commission does a really good job of it. But again, from my perspective, looking at this neighborhood, if you look at the north end as opposed to the south end, this neighborhood is surrounded, basically. So you've got industrial to the west, to the north, and then you have all heavy multi-units running down the river, and then you have Hamilton. Okay, so it's basically constrained on that, where the southern end has got some of the same adjacencies going on, but they have the river to relieve, they have other areas to relieve that set. This neighborhood could have some issues, because again, you look at it right the way it is, and the fact that it has a school site in the middle of it, it's essentially 8 blocks, and that's it. That's a pretty small neighborhood. So, from my perspective, we need to nurture it so that it, and we give the Historic Preservation Commission a chance to deal with the scaling issues up front. So if it's something that, makes sense or whatever in terms of rezoning it or something like that, we take it on a case-by-case basis. And then we deal with it depending on what it is and what the lot configuration is, whether they consolidate. Some of those properties in the R6 area, they're between 5th and 6th and thing, those could easily flip over. So you can get a consolidation of lots. If they're coming in with $600,000 condos, you can afford that. So from my perspective, this is a very unique neighborhood, and I think the clincher for me now, and I was kind of on the edge a little bit in the last meeting, but if it's been zoned since 1956 for high density, it hasn't happened yet, it ain't gonna happen. So, I think we should encourage it and go back to the multifamily or the SF8 MR district, just like we did on the south end of town. That's my opinion. Yes, Cindy.
But I'm worried, I don't want to lose what we have in Geneva, because once we lose it, it's gone, and we won't get it back. And you can't zone taste.
Well, we're not. We're just saying that it comes down to, from my perspective, it comes down to, do you want this to be a single-family neighborhood? That's what it comes down to. The fact that they're non-conforming existing multifamily and stuff, that can continue on under non-conforming uses, but we're in general saying we want this area to be a single-family neighborhood. And we do that by the
So then it should go
zoning.
back to R3 then.
Or we do it through the new downtown district. That's, to me, either R3 or the new downtown single-family district, which we have down in the south end of residential areas, would be sufficient. In the south end of the area, we have most of the residentially scaled commercial areas abut to the single-family district, and, we've got it, it's fine. That's what we've got here, but in Hamilton, I don't see a need to, let's be the same situation. Why do we need yet another buffer behind that? We don't even have it down in the south end of town. Yes.
I'm really torn on this, but one thing I would not want to see happen is if this was zoned so it was only single family, then the only option that someone has if they want to buy in here, you can't sell your house and have someone come in and put up 3 townhouses or a duplex or whatever anymore. You can sell it to someone who's going to use it for a single-family use only. And I wouldn't want to see it turn into a lot of tear downs with enormous, incredibly expensive infill houses like we do have south of the station. I think that's the worst. It doesn't accomplish anything. It ruins the character of the area, and it doesn't provide any variety in housing. It just perpetuates the enormous, overly expensive single-family houses that is all we're seeing come in here for the past several years. Basically, since the recession ended, that's all we get, is these incredibly expensive units. So I'd like to avoid that, and that's what makes me think if you changed it to R6, conceivably, you could have something less than that come in, because I think that would ruin the neighborhood just as much as putting up 3 townhouses would.
But how are you going to avoid greed?
Avoid what?
Greed.
I don't understand. What do you mean?
Because whoever comes in is going to want to make as much money as possible, and if the market would carry it, they're going to go for it. I mean, have we seen a townhouse development come through here that's less than $600,000 or $700,000?
Oh, I agree, the townhouses are overpriced too. I
I mean,
agree.
it's ridiculous. I mean, I have not seen anything that's affordable, like at $100,000 or $150,000.
I'm not looking for 100, 150, that was gone decades ago, but I think you could sell something at 300 would be nice. But I just would not prefer the $1 million giant single-family home.
Yeah, that's not good either.
No, and
Neither
if you go
is
back to,
Good.
so I'm trying to think of some way that you really have some way to accomplish what you're all saying you want to do, which is maintain the character of the area as it is, as single-family, and not unwittingly push yourselves to that tear-down infill situation.
I know.
Yes, ma'am, I guess we'll let you speak. I was waiting for a response from the commission. I didn't get one, so I'm going to let you speak.
Mine's brewing.
You'll have your turn.
So far, I don't think there's been any complete tear downs in
Not
this
right in that
section.
know not far, but not right in that
I know
area.
Acorn, he had a tiny house, that's one of the vacant lots there right now, but Peyton, the formerly yellow, now blue-gray house, that was all just remodeled. Then the corner of quarter of Second and Ford, that's an addition, they kept the original house, they put on addition, that's still under construction. My house was the original house is there, and back in 2007, somebody put an addition on. I think it looks very nice and to scale and not out of proportion. And then also there's another home like that on Peyton, White House this would be in the 400 block. Original house is all up there in the front, and then they had put their addition on the back, very to scale and everything. So far, everything that's been remodeled severely has, I think, done a good job of keeping it to scale.
Mike, are you ready?
No, not at the moment. Well,
Okay.
nothing at the moment.
I was going to say that, put 2 cents in on this, is I was part of the downtown master plan, and I'm obviously part of the committee that did the downtown zoning update analysis. And I can say that the analysis that was provided for this downtown zoning was much more detailed, and whether it's technology or whatever, but we're drilling down to house by house, looking at nonconformities and things. That type of analysis, I don't believe, was done in the 2003, nor necessarily the downtown master plan. It was a much higher look, whereas this recommendation and what they're doing is, that's where we're looking and finding more of these multiple family zoning districts that we have, or houses in that district. And that's not and that reflects a number of the people that have those type of units and have, what we talk about since 1956, it's been consistent to try to have this area as multiple family as it complements, Hamilton and down to State Street. So I'm just saying that I think what you're seeing today is much more of a detailed analysis that really wasn't done in the last two as far as individual neighborhoods or individual lots.
What are the thoughts on having the south side of Hamilton remain R6, but not the north side? I'm just throwing out options. I'm not advocating for it. I'm just,
You mean Peyton?
Peyton, I'm sorry, you're right, Peyton, yeah. What backs up to Hamilton?
I mean, if we're looking for a compromise, I think that's something that I'm pretty much in favor of going with the recommendation of making this high density. But if we're looking for a compromise, I certainly think that's reasonable. And it seems to make sense with everything that's across the street from it on the other side of Peyton.
You know, I would advocate keeping it as is. And again, one of the other goals of diversity and density is to support the businesses. So that's another opportunity that potentially lost if it is maintained as solely single family.
Anybody else? Just, I think we just vote.
Yeah, I was going to say, if we're kind of done, somebody can make a motion on what they think is appropriate, and we can go from there. Or if we need to think and discuss more, we can do that as well.
I'd like to hear a clear summation of what the choices are.
I guess
Are there like three?
what I've heard,
There's
there's
a lot
many.
of different choices we can make.
But what I've heard this evening is some commissioners are in favor of keeping it in the mixed high-density residential, the entire area. I've heard consensus that everybody agrees west of 6th Street should be that mixed high-density residential.
Yeah, I think that's a settled.
Yeah,
That's settled.
that's
So
done
that-
deal.
That's
Done,
settled.
right?
And now, the last one I heard was that it could be everything west of 6th Street and everything south of Peyton Street. That would be in the mixed high-density residential, and then
Yeah,
these two blocks along 5th and 6th would go back to single family.
So those would become a single family again,
That what
to be consistent with the 8 blocks just east of that.
Right.
Right. I'm sorry, I thought that's what was just discussed, right?
Yeah.
That was
You were
something I was-
suggesting?
That's what I was suggesting. It gives that area a
Those
little
two-
bit more of
outside
Yeah,
protection.
those two.
Peyton, right?
yeah, those two go back to single family.
Yeah, so this all becomes, single family,
Right.
or
All yellow
R3.
here, right?
That
Becomes
becomes
R-
yellow
R3,
again.
Right, this all becomes R3.
Including here, right?
No,
No.
No.
That. Just
no,
those.
this.
Just those two blocks.
Just
Those
those
two
two
blocks.
blocks.
Okay.
And
Just the
then-
ones that David's mousing right now?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Just
those two that David's
All right, but then
mousing
the half.
And the
sorry,
south
I
side
lost
of
the street
Peyton
right there,
Mousing.
so that's, yep.
becomes,
mousing.
those 4 half blocks.
Yep.
1, 2,
Would
5,
stay
5 half
R6.
blocks.
Yeah.
Stay R6.
Yeah, that would
Okay.
stay R6. But those 2 blocks stay yellow.
Right. Gives that, for those who are concerned about protecting that,
A little piece,
the part that is yellow now, it gives them a little bit more protection, but it still gives us some room to create some higher density housing near downtown.
yeah.
I could go with that compromise.
I could do that too.
I think that's a good idea. We can do
Yeah,
that.
Should be,
Yeah, and I think, again, we'll see how it goes. I mean, when we make this change,
So,
we'll see how
R3,
things progress, and if they
Right.
don't progress, then
R3.
we can revisit it again.
I'd be okay with that.
Okay.
I could
see
live
if,
with it.
if that's the consensus of the group, that's fine. If not, do we need to take a roll call?
No,
No, I could do, I'm all right with
Does
that.
anybody object to that
No.
agreement?
So we're keeping
Not enough
where it
to
says
work.
R6
Change a vote.
and,
Yeah.
R6 and the block to the north
Right.
will go
Right.
single family.
yeah.
Right, and this boundary becomes a higher
I just
density.
want to get it from him.
So, to summarize, the two blocks to the west of Fifth Street, between Fifth and Sixth, north of Peyton, would be R3.
R3.
And everything else that's shown in there, the settled matter, everything west of Sixth, obviously. And then everything south of Peyton to the district that fronts on Hamilton would be the R6.
Right.
Just for the record, it's the new zoning district.
Well,
So
the new
mixed
zoning
high-density residential and single-family medium residential. Okay.
The single-family residential district versus the,
Okay.
Sorry, Celeste.
whatever there's too many acronyms.
Too many letters.
But anyway.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I'd be fine with that.
Okay. So that was that specific area.
The rest of the commission, anybody else? They're with it? They're on board? Okay.
Thank you very much. So that was that specific area. We had the areas on the east side of town and the other side of Richards. Those didn't seem to be areas of concern at the last meeting. I don't know if they are now. Otherwise, that was really all I had planned for discussion this evening, unless there's anything else that the commission wants to discuss. Or this gentleman that's been waiting
There is
patiently.
a gentleman waiting, but I want to make sure we close this matter and there isn't anything outstanding. So nothing else on the changes that are proposed. No issues with the ones we settled on earlier, so nothing outstanding. Okay. All right, so we'll hear from the gentleman who's waited.
Poor guy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. My name is Frank Guayardo. I'm the owner of 308 Anderson Boulevard, Altero, The Karate, and Sparks Reprographics. I was just recently made aware of this, and I'm just looking for clarification exactly how it impacts my property with this new zoning. My understanding is I would be legal non-compliant if the zoning changes.
In terms of your setbacks and lot coverage, correct, you'd be legal non-conforming because you pretty much take up the entire lot between the building and parking lot. The use remains conforming, so it's a commercial zone, so the restaurant can stay indefinitely. If you decide to sell the business, a new restaurant can take over. So in that case, there's no issues. It really comes down to if the site is cleared and new development comes in, it would have to adhere to some setbacks and parking standards.
Oh, okay, so it doesn't change. Let's say the karate studio left and a new tenant came in. Am I restricted as to who I could rent to?
No. So it's still a commercial zoning district. So from that end, you can change over tenants, retail, commercial, office uses that you have now. The restaurant use would be allowed. If you did redevelop the property in the future, you could do so as commercial, or you could also do so as single-family, two-family, or three-family. So it'd just be of a more residential scale, not like the building to the north of you that's much taller.
Got it.
Right.
Yeah, and we share a wall with that building. And my neighbor, who's Barry, he had contacted me, he said, based on, and that's why I wanted to come and get some clarification, based on the new zoning, because there's that adjoining wall, we would have to separate. I said, well, geez, that's would be astronomical to tear a building down to rebuild it. But as long as it doesn't affect the current use, or if I get a new tenant, it's not restricting me at who I can rent to, then I don't see an issue
Right.
with it.
So it's really impactful if the block redevelops, is when you would have to adhere to new standards. Okay. In terms of setbacks and lot coverage, but as an existing condition that can remain kind of indefinitely.
Great. Well, that's it.
Oh, okay, all right.
I appreciate it.
All right, glad we got it answered.
Thank you.
Okay. I think I can take a motion on the hearing, because maybe I can't.
Sorry.
Is there another item that came up
I
in
think
the interim?
I think because the commission recommended a change on these properties, the best thing to do would be to leave the hearing open and just notify those properties of the
yes.
recommendation.
Yes.
In case there's any concern from their end of being a zoned single family, give them an opportunity to address that with the commission.
Because there's a completely different district than originally noticed.
Right, so they were noticed as being in the mixed density. So
Will you have another public hearing?
it would be another
Before this
public
all
hearing.
comes closed, gets closed?
It would be continuing this public hearing and then giving them an opportunity to speak.
So
How
then
long would
all-
it take
all
you
those-
to get a notice out?
I'm counting days here. 1, 2, 3.
All those multiple family units that are marked up there on that map are now going to be legal non-conforming if this
Correct.
passes.
Correct.
Right, so there may be concern there. So we don't have time to make it for the May 9th meeting, so it'd have to be the May 23rd meeting that this would be continued to.
Do I have a motion?
Motion to continue the public hearing?
To a date specified, yep,
So moved.
May
So
23rd.
moved to continue the
Okay.
public hearing to May 23rd?
Second.
Second?
Jadish.
Celeste, call roll, please.
Jadish.
Aye.
Evans.
Aye.
Kasserag.
Aye.
Leidig.
Aye.
Slivka.
Aye.
Stevenson.
Aye.
Stocking.
Aye.
That passes.
Okay. The end is in sight.
Well, thank you all very much for the discussion. It's been a long road, we appreciate the time.
Yep. Nice job.
I did want to give just,
Appreciate all your work.
thank you.
Yeah, it's a big project.
Just wanted to give one quick update, and I don't know if Paul has any he'd like to share as well, but the city is reaching an agreement with Shodine for the charrette process. That was approved by the city council. We had our first kickoff meeting earlier this week with the team. So it's really exciting that we're going to have this planning project coming this summer. So I just wanted you all to be on notice that the charrette will take place the week of June 24th. So that's June 24th through the 27th, Monday through Thursday. We will all be invited to participate throughout the process. Try to keep your calendars open if you can. We'll notice every public meeting as an open meeting so you can all attend and participate in the discussion. We'll be putting together a list of key persons to interview, and we'll include members of the Plan Commission and Historic Preservation Commission too. So just wanted to kind of put you on notice that those dates have been set, and hopefully you don't have travel plans for that week.
So what time, generally speaking, are these in the evening? Like,
So, right, the public meetings will take place in the evening. The interviews will probably take place either like late afternoon or early morning. We'll have to work around people's schedules for those.
and we are interviewees or interviewers?
We haven't finalized that list yet. You would be interviewees.
Okay.
What were the dates, David?
June 24th through the 27th.
Okay, I am out of town on well, I'll be back in the evening. Okay, so that could work. So for the charrette, it's going to be held each of those nights?
So-
Or one of those nights within that time period?
It's, I guess the entire charrette is the 4-day period. But
Okay.
there's different portions that are open to like public participation, and there's other portions that are more doing the stakeholder interviews
Okay.
and developing concept plans. But those portions that are the public meetings will be held in the evenings
It's a design charrette for what project?
for mill racing. So there's not a preconceived notion of what it will be. We're trying to understand what the limitations of the site are from floodplain perspective, access, and then what the market realities are. So we've got kind of sub-consultants within the team that'll help us all start with the same set of facts and then manage expectations on what realistically can be accomplished.
Cool.
Yeah.
Very nice, very nice.
Paul, if you had anything else to?
Yeah, just mark your calendars for May 9th, in our next Plan Commission meeting. We'll have 2 cases. One will be Oberweis outlot in front of At Home. They're creating a drive-through there for 3 of the Oberweis concepts there. They're ready to go. And then we also have At Home requesting a sign variation that same night. So basically dealing with that same property. So that's what we'll have on the May 9th, and obviously May 23rd, we'll be back with downtown zoning, so.
Did I see the at-home, that sign? Thought I saw something that said it was on the north side of the building?
Yes. That's-
I didn't quite read into it, but
It kind of sticks out in front of the rest of the center a little
Yeah.
bit. So when you come out of fresh time, the idea was you'd be able to look down and see what that building is, because right now you don't.
got it. It's kind of trying to picture the north side of at home.
Yeah,
I'm
I
having
didn't
a hard
think there
time
was
with
a
that.
north side.
Yeah.
Right.
Got
But I
it.
guess there is. Okay.
Is that it?
I
Move.
think that's it.
All right, move to adjourn.